Imagine a perfect world where food never runs out, water is always available, and there are no predators. Surprisingly, this perfect place ended in disaster. This story begins with American scientist John B. Calhoun, who wanted to understand how overcrowding could affect animal behavior over many generations. During the 1960s and early 1970s, Calhoun created special mouse habitats designed to provide everything the animals needed to survive comfortably. Inside these habitats, the mice had unlimited food, clean water, comfortable nesting areas, and protection from predators, disease, and harsh weather. At first, everything seemed perfect. The mouse population grew steadily because resources were plentiful and survival became much easier than in nature. As more mice were born, the habitat became increasingly crowded. Although food remained abundant, personal space gradually became much harder to find. Researchers observed changes in behavior as crowding increased. Competition for space and social interactions became more complicated despite the constant supply of food. Some mice became unusually aggressive, while others withdrew from social activity. Scientists carefully documented these behavioral changes without assuming they applied directly to humans. Calhoun noticed that some mice stopped participating in normal social behaviors, while others spent much of their time eating, grooming, or resting alone. One group became famous as the beautiful ones because they appeared healthy, avoided conflict, and spent much of their time grooming themselves. Over time, reproduction slowed dramatically within the mouse colony. Eventually, the population stopped growing despite abundant food and comfortable living conditions. Eventually, the colony entered a long decline. Even though resources remained available, the population continued shrinking until no mice remained in the habitat. Calhoun described these results as a warning about social breakdown in overcrowded environments, but interpreting the findings requires careful scientific discussion. Many people later connected these experiments to modern cities, but scientists caution that mice and humans behave very differently in complex societies. Human behavior is influenced by culture, education, technology, relationships, and personal choices, making direct comparisons with mouse experiments much more complicated. Even today, Calhoun's experiments continue to spark fascinating debates about behavior, society, and how environments influence the lives of both animals and people. As the mouse population continued growing, the habitat entered a new phase. Space became limited even though food and water remained unlimited. Researchers noticed that some mice competed for the same popular nesting spots instead of spreading evenly throughout the available habitat. Some mice showed more aggressive behavior during social interactions, while others became quieter and avoided contact whenever possible. Calhoun described these changes as signs that overcrowding could influence normal social behavior inside the experimental mouse colony. Some mothers stopped caring for their young as consistently as before, reducing the survival rate of newborn mice inside the colony. Other mice became isolated, spending much of their time eating, sleeping, or grooming instead of joining normal social activities. Calhoun later introduced the phrase behavioral sink to describe severe social disruption observed in some crowded mouse populations during his experiments. It is important to remember that behavioral sink describes observations within these mouse experiments and should not automatically be applied to human societies. Scientists today continue discussing which parts of Calhoun's findings remain useful and which conclusions should be interpreted with greater caution. Modern researchers often compare Calhoun's work with newer studies involving psychology, sociology, animal behavior, and environmental science. Unlike laboratory mice, humans create cultures, laws, technology, education systems, and communities that strongly influence how people respond to crowded environments. Because of these differences, most scientists avoid making simple one-to-one comparisons between Calhoun's mouse colonies and modern human civilization. Even so, Calhoun's experiments remain famous because they encourage important discussions about social environments, planning, and community well-being. The experiments remind us that healthy societies depend on much more than food and shelter. Relationships, purpose, and supportive communities also matter greatly. Today, documentaries, books, and online discussions still reference Calhoun's work because it raises fascinating questions about behavior and social organization. Understanding the Calhoun experiments requires both curiosity and critical thinking. Good science asks questions, examines evidence, and avoids jumping to simple conclusions. As Calhoun's experiments became widely known, newspapers, documentaries, and books sparked debates about whether similar patterns could ever appear in human societies. Many people believed the experiment predicted humanity's future. However, Calhoun studied mice, and human societies are far more diverse and complex. Modern scientists generally agree that Calhoun's work raises interesting questions, but it should not be treated as a direct prediction about human civilization. Unlike mice, humans solve problems through education, culture, technology, communication, and cooperation, allowing societies to adapt to changing environments over time. Researchers today study cities using psychology, sociology, economics, and public health instead of relying only on one famous animal experiment. Healthy communities often depend on supportive relationships, meaningful work, education, safe neighborhoods, and opportunities that help people thrive together. The Calhoun experiments remind scientists that environment can influence behavior, but many different biological, social, and cultural factors also play important roles. Scientific discoveries become stronger when researchers repeat experiments, compare evidence, and test different explanations instead of accepting one answer immediately. Critical thinking helps us separate interesting ideas from proven conclusions. Asking good questions is one of the most important parts of science. Even decades later, students continue learning about Calhoun because his experiments encourage discussion about science, behavior, and the importance of careful interpretation. History shows that humans constantly adapt through creativity and cooperation. New challenges often inspire new solutions instead of inevitable collapse. The Calhoun experiments remain valuable because they encourage deeper conversations about how environments affect behavior while reminding us to avoid oversimplified conclusions. Good science is not about finding easy answers. It is about collecting evidence, asking better questions, and improving our understanding over time. Whether discussing animals or humans, every scientific study should be understood within its limits before making broad conclusions about the real world. The Calhoun Effect continues to inspire discussions because it combines fascinating experiments, complex questions, and valuable lessons about interpreting scientific research responsibly. What do you think is the biggest lesson from the Calhoun experiments? Share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more fascinating science and history documentaries.